Welcome to our first Innovators Workbench of this season. And I couldn't think of a better way to start this year's events with a tremendous person who has led so many important changes for all of us here in California, but really for healthcare overall across the United States and really the world. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. Thank you for being here. You will also notice on the stage our very own Kavita Patel.
Hey. You're like, who is that?
Who we have very artfully roped in to help us build the Stanford Biodesign Policy Program. And this is the beginning of a series which we hope to repeat each year and have an important policy leader come and speak to us. And I couldn't really think of a better way to start than with Anna Eshoo. I want to thank Wilson Sonsini Goodrich-Rosati for supporting the event tonight. I'll ask everyone to silence their phones. And then I'll just mention that at the end of the event, we're going to have a nice reception out there where we hope to mingle and get a chance to talk about whatever we wish and enjoy this special event. So thank you for coming. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Josh McAuer, the director of Stanford Biodesign. And it's thrilling to see you here. And I hand it off to Kavita. Take it away.
All right, thank you. All right, we're hot. Mics are hot. Thank you, Josh. And yes, I'm not only honored to share this stage, but hope to have what will be, I think, a fun kind of evening. We're gonna keep it light. We'll maybe get a little heavy at times, just to give you an overview. We're gonna try to have a discussion if we have time for questions, but if not, I think the Congresswoman has agreed to stick around. She loves this.
Be happy to.
She loves the Stanford environment. As
I do.
Who can blame it? Look at this perfect weather and this perfect audience. And I know we've got a virtual audience as well, so I want to thank all of those listening as well. So I do have to say, in full disclosure, I've had the pleasure of working with her when I worked for Senator Edward M. Kennedy, the Democrat from Massachusetts, and a very dear friend of hers who, you don't remember this because you weren't in the room, when Senator Kennedy was working on cancer legislation, this is before the Affordable Care Act, and he really wanted to think about kind of all the changes that need to be made at the FDA, changes for access and coverage, because his goal, and this is before he had his own unfortunate diagnosis of glioblastoma, one of the members of Congress that he said you must go talk to in order to think about what we need to do, and she'll really champion this on the House side, was Anna Eshoo. And sure enough, it was very clear because you had a precedent of working on regulatory issues, a career of really fighting for innovation, both within the government, but also outside of the government. But you also had this kind of command of, there's a lot of survivors. You were one of the first people that kind of said, look, there are more and more people surviving with cancer. They're getting other cancers. How can we think about access to not just treatments, but what type of programs, if you've survived a cancer that you have been given a death sentence for with all these therapies and innovations, what kind of care do you receive? So I will say that was a good lesson for Senator Kennedy to have all those years ago. And I'm gonna just read a bit of your bio because we're not gonna spend time on your published bio. I know. I have to point out a couple of things. The most important thing is that on January 15th, 2019, you were the first woman ever to be appointed and serve as chair of what is one of the most powerful committees in Congress, the Health Subcommittee of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Those are a lot of words that many of you don't understand, but this is really the original badass woman because I can't believe it took until 2019, but I can't think of a better person to do it. So you've had the ability to kind of work not just as leaders on some of the most influential committees, but I do have to say that some of your proudest moments, I think you'll get to talk about this, work you did not just on the Affordable Care Act, on so many FDA authorizations, all the UFAs and all the Ahs and all the things that I think many of us take for granted because we are the beneficiaries. If any of you are delivering clinical care, working, studying in this university, much of what we now take for granted, whether it's TAVR for cardiology, whether it's medical devices that we don't even think about when we're administering vaccines, that wouldn't have happened unless we actually had some of these regulatory pathways and the world benefits, something that the Congresswoman talks about. But let's talk about your personal story and your journey here, if you don't mind. This is, I think, something that the Innovators Workbench, and Josh has taught me, and we've got a lot of luminaries in here, Brooke Byers, Paul Yack. There's a number of people who help build kind of this innovation ecosystem here. But this all starts with a personal story. So I have to share some of your personal story because I think it would be wonderful to hear how you first came, not just into politics, but what led you to public service, kind of some of your earliest memories of even how did you think about some of those first roles that you took on at the county level, at the local level? And I'm just going to say you're a graduate, so you have two children, Karen and Paul, and you have this wonderful blended heritage, Assyrian and Armenian. And I think that plays some role in kind of what you fight for, as well as a graduate of Canada College,
Kenyatta.
Kenyatta, that's right, I'm sorry. I said, wait a minute. That's Kenyatta College, and I know, and awarded an honorary degree by Menlo College. And was it your first elected position at the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors? Yes. And so we'd love to hear a little bit about that led you on a journey to be elected in 1992. So start with a young Anna Eshoo.
Well, first, I want to start by saying thank you, because it is really an honor to be here once again on the Stanford campus. I want to thank Josh. Where is Josh? Dear Josh, whom I've worked with and known for so many years, and to come and to be with the fellows that are a part of this program, where they are from, all over the world, and what their hopes and aspirations are. It's an extraordinary program. To my friend Brooke Byers, who has really been a mentor to me. We all need femtors and mentors. He's a mentor, and I couldn't mean that more. And to have Kavita here, who's now the policy director for this organization, the best. I mean, a first-rate, first-class professional. And I mean, she just is a powerhouse of knowledge, and that we share the stories of Kennedy. Yeah, and we're blessed because of that. I still think of him every day and what he would be saying and doing right now. Well, he'd be out there campaigning because the elections are 2 weeks from today. So the earlier, younger Anna, I give a great deal of credit to my mother and father. I think the day I was born, I think that I won the lottery. I was born in America, and to two really extraordinary, ordinary people. They were decent. They had great values. They never preached to us. All we had to do was watch them, because they were great examples. And when Daddy would come home for dinner every night from work, he was a jeweler, and he would say, let me tell you what the president did today. That's the way he would start out. And so he'd share something with us. I think sometimes we really didn't know what he was talking about, but we knew that it was important. We knew that it was important. And my mother was a wonderful advocate in different organizations, but neither one of them ever wanted to run for office or be appointed to anything. They were Democrats. We had, in our entry hall, there was a portrait of FDR, and then later on, JFK and the Pope. So that kind of sums up.
That's who's
that kind of sums up Anna. And but I had the privilege of working for someone that was a great source of inspiration to me. Some of you may remember him. Some of you wouldn't even recognize the name. He was the Speaker of the California legislature, Leo McCarthy. And we all know that saying, the closer you get, the less you like what you see. The closer I got, the more I respected him. He was a man of enormous integrity, and he was a superb legislator. Actually, it was Leo's idea that I should be in elective office. I'd never thought about, I didn't think of myself that way at all. Now, you probably don't believe me, you know, when they say politicians say these things, but that was not, I just didn't see myself
Was
in
it a
that.
conversation that he kind of said, listen, you should run for office? How did that unfold?
Well, he was preparing to run statewide, and he hadn't made the decision as to whether he was going to run for the United States Senate or lieutenant governor. He ended up running lieutenant governor, and I said to him, Leo, you know that I'll do anything and everything I can, whatever your decision is. He said, you're not going to be here. You're not going to be here. You're going to be at home in San Mateo County and running for office. And I said, oh, come on. So, but that's actually what I ended up doing. So I did, and I absolutely loved that job. In California, counties are powerful.
Oh, yeah.
In many states, they're not. But in California, we implement all the state and federal laws. So we had this little group that came to the house, you know, they're in my family room, the structure of the campaign. They said, okay, now what are the issues? What are you going to run on? And I said, I'm going to run on health care. And there was dead silence in the room. It sounded like like a thud. That's the way it landed. But then when I told my friends what the statistics were in San Mateo County, how many children had no health care coverage whatsoever, how many people were not even participating in what we call Medi-Cal. Nationally, it's known as Medicaid. How many people had to take how many buses to San Mateo to get their health care at the county hospital and the small clinic that was there, and buses from Daly City to there. I thought, why aren't there community clinics that people can go to? So that's how it all started.
Congresswoman, how was talk about your first election, kind of this experience, running for office?
Oh, it was hard.
Yeah, well, I'm sure.
It was hard.
Talk about some of the challenges you had to overcome. It's not.
Well, first of all, it was a countywide election. Countywide election. So that's everything from Daly City down to Atherton, Menlo Park, you know, the entire county. It was larger than a congressional district. So that's a big campaign. I think that it's a good thing I didn't realize how large it was, because it was intimidating, you know. And I wasn't challenging an incumbent. The incumbent actually had very poor health, and he was a fairly young man, and he didn't live that many years later. But there were 11 people in this race.
Wow.
So I remember going to, again, I don't really stretching people's memories here. At that time, there was a very, very powerful newspaper publisher and editor, J. Hart Clinton, the San Mateo Times. San Mateo Times decided what was going to happen and who was going to do it in San Mateo County. That's how powerful it was. And I remember going to that editorial board. I got there early. I sat in the parking lot, and I said part of the rosary before I went in. I thought, I don't think the Blessed Mother is interested in the San Mateo Times, but what the hell, I'm going to say some prayers anyway. And but I went in, there's a big conference room, long table, all men, all white men, with glasses at the tip of their noses, peering at me. And Mr. Clinton, of course, at the head of the table, and he said, well, I see here that you have done this in the community and that in the community, and and some of this and some of that. And I said, well, Mr. Clinton, I'm very proud of that. And I highlighted some of the things that I had done, the boards that I had served on. And he took the piece of paper and he just kind of threw it on the table. And he said, none of this matters because you weren't paid by anyone. How do you like that? So, I mean, it was like a good part of my life had just been thrown in the trash bin. But I thought, you know, regardless of what this newspaper does, and they were very fond of Republicans, and most of San Mateo County was Republican at that time. I went out and campaigned my heart out. And, you know, women were very much a part of that campaign. And I had, you know, friends in different parts of the county, and they stepped up in their city, and we built organizations in all 20 cities. And then I was in a runoff. It was the first time in the history of the county that two women were running off against one another.
Wow.
And it was Joan Stiff, who was mayor of Woodside. And I remember Fritz Mondale, I didn't know that he had here, but he sent a note to me. He said, I love the billboards, Eshoo and Stiff. I think you can beat a Stiff, you know? I still have the note that he wrote to me. Actually, she was a very lovely woman, and we prevailed. So I was obviously beyond thrilled. But it was my first elective office.
Yeah.
And so I learned very quickly that you had to work with all the other members, obviously. And, you know, I had my own vote. You need 2 more to be the majority, but I always went for 5. So it's a tall order in the House. I need 217 others to agree with me.
Yeah, the House.
And I need the White House
Right.
to support what I'm doing. And then, God help us, you go over to the Senate. So that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story.
Well, so talk about your journey to the House then. So San Mateo.
Well, I ran in 1988, and that was, it was a big decision. And actually, it was women that
Encouraged you.
were the ones that encouraged me.
What sticks out as what kind of put you over the edge? Or what were your hesitations kind of going into it?
Well, I mean, I didn't think of myself as a member of Congress, you know, and most frankly, we didn't have very many role models.
Right.
It's not as if,
Today.
you know, you picked up the newspaper and saw a woman on the front page or on TV being interviewed. It was a rarity. And the women, I think when I look back, that they zeroed in on were kind of oddballs.
Yeah.
You know, or considered oddballs. You know, on the left there was what's her name from New York? Bella, yeah, with the hat, right?
Yeah.
And then the more conservative, the woman with the corncob pipe. So I mean, these are not women that you meet every day. I mean, that, you know, I mean, each one in their own way made terrific contributions, but they zeroed in on
They focused on
people that were
Yeah.
odd.
And what was
considered
your,
odd
talk
at the
about where
time.
your family, how did they factor into this decision?
Well, I had to do everything.
Right. I mean,
and that's hard to
story
do
as old
because
as
my
time,
children
yes.
were much younger.
Yeah.
And being on the Board of Supervisors, I was close to home.
Yeah.
Because the County Government Center is just up the road. It's in Redwood City. And
Right, this would involve you being back and forth.
exactly. Karen was already in college. Paul was in high school. So, you know, it was a struggle to make the decision. At any rate, I made it. And it was a huge campaign. I never regretted doing it.
Yeah.
We lost.
Yeah.
Tom Campbell, you remember,
Yeah.
was elected.
Yeah.
He was a professor here in at the law school. And, but it's a very interesting thing, and I've never shared this with anyone, but I'll share it with you. And that is that when I called Tom that evening to congratulate him, he said, Anna, you'll be in the Congress in a handful of years. And
What an odd, that's a gracious but odd thing to say.
yeah, and I thought, oh, he's being overly nice, you
No,
know.
he was serious.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess he was serious, and he went on to run for the Senate,
Yeah, he
and I think he's still in Southern California. We would see each other from time to time. He was a gentleman. He was a gentleman, a real gentleman. So that campaign, this is a nice thing. That campaign became a permanent case study at Harvard, at the Kennedy School.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. We were having a campaign meeting at my house, and my son came in, and I said, just a second, everybody. I said, Paul, take this videotape back to the store. Remember, you'd rent
Blockbuster?
them,
This was
and
like
if you didn't take them back on time, it was like you had to pay double, triple, quadruple. Well, he was at a time in his life where he was really spacey. And so I said, take that damn thing back to the video shop. And someone on my campaign said, that's it. I said, that's what? We didn't have the money to go on TV. This is the second most expensive media market in the state.
Oh, wow.
Los Angeles is first. And so what we did, and it was hard to do, I had newfound respect for actors, we did a video. We did a video. And people campaign, we didn't have the money to mail them, but we had an army of volunteers.
Send 'em out.
In 2 weekends, we distributed 110,000 videos.
Wow.
And it was my message. It was Anna
You just
speaking
spoke
and what my, yes.
Very honestly
Yes,
to,
yeah.
to the voters.
And it was hard to do. I had so many takes and all of that. But some people still have them because they walk up to me and tell me, I still have your
That became
video.
the basis
It's
of
in
the
my
case study, 'cause that was the
That's
first
right.
time
And
that you-
it was the first time that that a campaign had used that medium to communicate with people. So it was so unique.
incredible.
And, yeah, but we didn't make it. Now, I was heartbroken for all the people that supported us because so many people worked so hard. And it was the advent of Emily's List. It was the advent of Emily's List for House members. That was, do you all know what that is? Yes,
Yeah,
most
talk
of you
a
know.
little bit about how influential Emily's List is and how it's a pretty important
Well,
organization.
one of the great advantages for men who were running for office or ran for office is they had networks.
Right.
That all the people that they worked with,
Donors,
their
campaign staff, all of it.
exactly, all of that, and people in the community, where they traveled, you know, who they grew up with, their colleges and universities, and all of that. But women did not have those networks, and if they had them, they hadn't been stitched together and activated for campaign purposes. And so along came Emily's List. Emily's List stands for early money is like yeast. It makes the dough rise, okay?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's a woman named Emily, but it's
No,
not.
it's not. That's what the letters stand for. And they came together to support, at that time, the senator from, well, she became senator from Maryland,
Oh, Mikulski.
Barbara Mikulski. And it was, so they came together and went out across the country with mailing lists about Barbara Mikulski and why it was so important to elect a woman. And of course, I think you may know that in campaigns, you know, the leadership and all the big shots in each party, they measure, one of the measurements and strength of your candidacy is how much money you have, which says how many donors you have, how much support you have, yes, endorsements, yes, the organization of your campaign, but money. You can't do a darn thing without having campaign money. So there were several men that were lined up to become the next senator, U.S. senator from the state of Maryland, and it was Barbara Mikulski that made it over the finish line. So when I ran in 1988, it was the first cycle that Emily's List supported women for the United States House of Representatives. So in the aftermath of that, I had no regrets because it was a great campaign. It was a great experience. We did a fabulous job. We just came short in terms of the vote. So I didn't know what I was going to do next. There were term limits at the Board of Supervisors, but I had made a list of 8 people that I had enormous regard for, that knew me rather well, and I was taking each one out to lunch and asking them what they thought I should do next. And then came 92. And Tom decided to run. Tom Campbell was running for the Senate. So this was, again, an open seat. But I didn't want to run.
Why?
Well, I thought I've been there and I've done that. And, you know, once you've done it, you understand the enormity of it. And it's hard. I mean, it is from morning until night, until late at night, and then early in the morning, every single day. It's a roller coaster ride. It's hard. And I mean, there's a lot of joyfulness about it, but it's very hard. And you have, God bless you, Brooke, enormously. But women weighed in, and they said to me, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. All we're asking you to do is to look at the new lines, because this was, like all congressional districts, it was redistricted. It was redistricted. And they said the district has changed. The district has changed. So I looked, I thought, I went over to the coast side, I walked on the beach, and I thought, I made the decision based on the following. It's not about me, I'm a vehicle for people. And you know, there are always big issues in America, and I thought, okay, I'll do it. And so I did, and we won. And it was dubbed the year of the woman. So the intention was, you better make it in 92, otherwise we don't think we're going to do this again.
Not a lot of, just a little pressure, right?
It was so exciting. It's still exciting to me when I walk out on the floor of the House. And I look at that chamber and I think, isn't this something that I'm here? There are only, 11 or 12,000 individuals that have ever served in the Congress. I always look up to the gallery where my mother and father were, and Daddy went like this. You know, they were so excited. They were so excited. I mean, they're in heaven now, but they're still watching. And then how dare anyone attack the citadel of our democracy? That very chamber, that building. So, you know, we've kind of come full circle. No one would have ever dreamed that could have happened. So that's the journey, and then the work.
Yeah, talk a little bit. You started with healthcare at the county,
right?
And that's continued to be a theme.
Yes.
And I could spend probably the next day recounting some of my favorite policy milestones. But you have a number of issues that you're not only actively working on now, but kind of sites that you have set on. This is an audience of innovators, so
yes,
we definitely want to talk about, you're one of the co-chairs of the Medical Technology Caucus with Representative Randstad. You certainly have, I think, you've always been someone who's had the ear of innovation. You know, you've also been someone listening to them. Talk about
that's my district.
That's your district, yes. But I think that you also, what I've noticed is that you spend time, like you said, just being a vehicle for all of the kind of voices, and your district is certainly a pinnacle, but you have had a record.
I had to get on the right committee.
Well, yes.
You have to be on the right committee.
Speak to that for a minute. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, for those of you that you know, are going to be learning about the policy end of it, it's very difficult to launch legislation on anything that's health related
Right.
if you're on the Transportation Committee.
And how do
Okay.
those assignments get done? Can you speak to?
Oh, it's a
political.
tough job.
Right. The campaign doesn't stop at November.
Oh,
is
no,
what we're-
no, there's,
the
you
campaign
know what, there's
continues.
politics in life wherever we are. As long as there are human beings around, there are going to be politics. Maybe not party politics, but it's politics. So there was no way that a freshman would be able to get onto the Energy and Commerce Committee.
It's literally
Yeah,
the most powerful.
it sounds very boring. The words. It
doesn't even have health in the
No,
committee,
it
which is
doesn't.
always-
But it's one of the big three.
Yeah.
The big three: Energy and Commerce, Ways and Means, Tax Writing Committee.
Yep.
It's massive, and the all-powerful Appropriations Committee, the Money Committee. So if I do a policy, but it's going to cost $250 million, the appropriators have to put the money next to that. So there's no way, and they're exclusive committees. It's the only committee you serve on. So I went in and I had Merchant Marine and Fisheries, and
There are a lot of those.
Science, Space, and Technology, at which I loved.
That's a good one.
Yeah, oh, I did. I loved that. It was fascinating. But I also, in meeting with the people, the members that are on the steering committee, and the Republicans and Democrats do it a little differently, but this is all internal to the caucus. And I made it known that I wanted to, in the future, serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and told them why. It was the best place in terms of my district. And even at that time, we were considered, the innovation capital of our country. And they all know, members all knew, even if they were more concerned about the price of durum wheat, well, that's legitimate. That's where they come from. So that's what they need to take care of. But they all were aware of this place. And then we lost the House. We lost the House. Democrats lost the House after holding the House, being the majority for 40 years. And in came Newt Gingrich. Oh my God. Oh my God. I still say, oh my God. Well, I thought for sure there's no way now that I'm going to be able to get onto Energy and Commerce. And I'll tell you why. Because one of the great benefits of being in the majority is you have the majority of the seats on each committee. So there's more room for more of your members. When you're in the minority, you have less. The majority, it's not just the majority on the floor of the House, it's majority at every single committee. And so, I had my name before the Steering and Policy Committee, but I thought there's no way, because members were losing their seats on these key committees and trying to get onto Energy and Commerce. And they had a lot of seniority.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been there for 5 minutes, 2 years. But do you know what happened? They voted for me in the Steering and Policy. They must not like some of these other members. Probably had some, no, really, they probably had some grudges, access to grudge, who knows?
You were the newer kind of.
Yeah, they liked Anna.
Fresh face.
So I
You were
made
shocked
it.
when you
I was
first
shocked.
got that appointment.
But I was thrilled.
Loved it,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, I was thrilled. I thought, here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. So, so I have served on that committee all the years, with the exception of my first term, for 14 terms, so 28 years. And imagine, if you think it's not hard for women, honestly, everyone, the first woman in the history since our country was born to chair a subcommittee, but it's the health subcommittee. It's the health subcommittee.
the most powerful
And it's
subcommittee.
everything health is there. So whether it's medical devices, FDA, CDC, NIH, all of HHS, Medicare, you name it, health, care, anything is right there in that
So
subcommittee.
talk about some of the kind of issues. We spoke earlier about ARPA-H, the DEPICT. I think you've got some incredible legislation on trying to promote clinical trial diversity that you're very proud of. For those who don't know what ARPA, we can actually talk about your record, not just of ARPA-H, but you did an incredible job to bring innovation and research funding into energy. This is, and also DARPA, which I think a lot of people have become familiar with, especially since the pandemic. But
well, I mean, NIH, we're here at Stanford. Stanford is one of the top 3 in terms of universities in the receipt of the grants from NIH. And I have worked hard to keep it that way. So there's the research that takes place here is nothing short of extraordinary. And of course, the American people, actually people around the world, end up benefiting from that. No, so we created BARDA.
Yes.
At my health subcommittee. That was my legislation, bipartisan legislation. Biosimilars legislation with Senator Kennedy. That was folded into the Affordable Care Act. You know what's a good way to think about this subcommittee? It's the first table where the issues are set. It all starts at the health subcommittee. Now, the money and the funding of policies, obviously, the appropriators have to put the money to the policy. But the policy that's where it all starts.
So how do you choose? There's so many things that can come to the table.
One of the main ways is by listening to my constituents.
And what are
Listening to my constituents. So
reflect on what you're hearing as of late, especially in these.
Well, I'll tell you what I was hearing then was that how unhappy the medical device companies were because of the process that FDA used to approve their products.
Right. Talk about the problems at the time, because I think some of us take for granted that.
Well, essentially,
it was a lot worse before.
And I know this sounds very odd, but the FDA essentially used the same yardstick to measure medical devices as they did to approve everything else at the FDA.
It's the same.
Well, they're not. Everything is not the same, and I'm glad that I was fairly new as a member, because I think if I'd been there for a while, I wouldn't have taken the issue on. When President Clinton went to sign the bill, he put the pen down. It's a very big deal to go to a bill signing, and it's your bill. I mean, this is, it's an Alleluia day, right? And he put the pen down, and he looked at all of us, and he said, if anyone ever told me that this bill was going to be sent to me, I would have bet against it, because it was hard to do, very hard to do. But we did it. We got it done.
But what makes it, so I think this is also something that people, many of us kind of, we see the pictures of the bill signing, and then we kind of hear about something, and then it kind of goes away. We don't think about it. But leading up to that, it wasn't just that you had to deal with so many stakeholders and all these. You had to create not just bipartisan pathways to passage, because that was all. You couldn't just do anything with no Republican votes, and you really tried as much as you could. So this involved you going kind of hat in hand to offices, trying to make sure you caught members who might not have necessarily supported your views. Talk about some of the hard moments that made you say, I don't think I would do this again.
I can tell you that Democrats were wary.
Yeah.
And really reserved about it. Democrats are, most generally speaking, they're consumer advocates. They worry about whether something is going to be injurious. Does this mean that the standards are going to be lowered, that companies are going to be? I was aware, because I remember Senator Kennedy saying to me when I started that, he said, Anna, He said, in the basement of HHS, there are a lot of medical devices that killed people. I thought, oh my God, this is just for an opener. But he's,
By the way, it's why I didn't want to work on devices either.
Yeah,
You told
no,
us
it's
the
tough.
same story.
It was tough. So, and on the Republican side, whatever the companies ask for, give it to them and all of that. So that's a broad brushstroke, but that's what honestly, that's what I was dealing with. And so I started with committee members because they're the ones that are going to do you have to get their votes before you ever think of hoping you get to the floor of the House. And you can't assume that colleagues know everything about what you choose to work on and that you know a lot about. And you don't want to embarrass them for not knowing. So I tried to keep the explanation as digestible as possible. And, I did have a Republican lead, and the Republicans didn't even like him. They were taking bets because they said no one could work with him, and they were taking bets on how long I would last with him. But I got along really well with him. He complained. He always said, whenever I'd meet with him, he'd say, I don't know. He said, the score's not too good around here. Eshoo 10, Joe 0. I said, Joe, you don't know how to write a bill. You don't put prohibitions in the bill. It's always in a positive sense, how you state it. Anyway, and he was not a fan of President Clinton. He said, I'm not going to the Rose Garden. I said, come on, Joe.
He didn't go to the signing?
He did.
He did, after,
oh, yes,
but you didn't want to.
Oh, yes, we walked in together. It was like a wedding, Yeah, we kept it together. No, you have to, I think the most important thing for me to stress to you is you have to work very hard to knit support together. You have to make sure that the leadership of the other party doesn't come out against your legislation, because they'll tell members, as they have now, do not go on to any Democratic bills. That's what we're dealing with right now, you see? So anyway, we prevailed. We prevailed, and it really changed the industry, the medical device industry, and that's for the betterment of the American people. But then on the heels of that, we already had what's called PDUFA. That's the process of the pharmaceutical industry with the FDA. They negotiate and then pay fees.
Prescription drug user fee authorization.
Yeah, that had been in place for a very long time, and it was working very well.
Right.
So on the heels of the new law, of course, I thought when I went to the medical device people and said, okay,
hey,
now we
now
need
it's
to
your
talk
turn.
about fees. You could have peeled them off the ceiling. You could have peeled them off the ceiling.
It didn't go over very well?
It didn't go over well at all because the law had not...
It hadn't actually helped them. They
It hadn't helped
benefited
them yet.
from it.
They hadn't benefited from it. So I knew that I was too early on that. So I waited a couple of years, brought people together, and they saw the benefits and started that. And now we just did the reauthorization.
Which was a very big deal. Got
Yes.
very close.
Yeah.
What are some of the issues now that are coming to, well, at least things that you're thinking about, whether it's the device industry, biotechnology at large? What are some important issues that are coming to your table that you suspect you'll be tackling kind of in the new Congress?
Well, it depends upon the composition.
It does depend on the
Congress, too.
composition. That is true.
Yeah,
That
I
is
mean,
true.
because some things,
Depend on that. Right.
yeah, you know what the weather will be like. But for some things, it shouldn't deter us. I've served more in the minority than I have in the majority. So if you think you can't get things done when you're in the minority, then you're really capping yourself, but there are some issues that I know won't do very well if, in fact, the Republicans are the majority. I think, what we've talked about are previous victories, and they are hard-won. You have to work very, very hard. There are between 20 and 25,000 bills that are introduced in every 2-year session of Congress. 20 to 25,000. About 200 or less become law, including the budget.
I think then that's worse than the Stanford acceptance rate.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean,
easier
just
to get
to,
a bill
you know,
passed in
think,
Congress.
know that it's not an easy thing to do. I think the framers shaped a system where they didn't want the wheel to move real fast because a lot of damage could be done. So, frustratingly, it does take time, takes a lot of effort. I think what we need to really think long and hard about is how we continue innovating. I mean, I just said the framers, they were the original entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They were the original innovators. When you of how they thought, they were willing to go up against the power of the world, the British Empire, and said, no, we have different ideas than you do. So they still inspire me. My father was a very devout Catholic. He said, the Holy Spirit, he believed that the Holy Spirit was in the room with them because he said what they did was beyond extraordinary in their thinking and their courage, And I think that we have to continue to think of ourselves that way as a people. And what's in the way? Where are the weeds? What is holding back a particular industry or an effort of a given sector? We can never become complacent about our victories. They were great when they happened, and they sound a little quaint now. I'm thrilled that BARDA is doing what it's doing. You know, I have a new, a new effort that I've. Please God, I got it through the House, but now I'm dealing with Laguna Honda over there in the Senate. They don't know what Laguna Honda is here.
They don't,
No,
do they?
no.
You might need to.
Yeah, it's a convalescent home in San Francisco. They're still not laughing. They're still not laughing. Oh, that one bombed. Anyway.
It only works in the Beltway.
But it is, no, I'm very serious about this. And I always look for being instructed by others. I'm not in the private sector. I'm surrounded by it, and I have always made it a point to go to businesses, to meet with employees, to meet with the management team, and I always ask them, how's business, what's working, and what's not working? And so I'm very reliant on that. You have to listen very carefully to people. And as I said, it's not, so many of these things are not my expertise, but it's highly instructive to me. And if you hear the same theme ringing through, those that are engaged in basically the same kinds of businesses, then it gives you a good roadmap.
How, for example, there are a lot of issues, whether it's reimbursement, because there's many entrepreneurs and innovators who don't have the benefit of being kind of backed by large corporations or even large investors, and they're just trying to bootstrap and get their ideas through, and they can find roadblocks in these various ways. How can they bring their constituents, many of them are even listening, how can they bring some of these ideas forward in a way that you or your staff can actually consume, digest, and then turn around? And I know you've shared an experience earlier before this conversation here with how Josh and others kind of led the charge to help talk about the changes that needed to be made at the FDA around medical device regulation. But it wasn't just, hey, let's have a conversation about how hard this is. They had to bring data. They had to kind of come multiple times, and
they didn't know to bring data.
That's true. You had to, let me rephrase, you had to tell them to bring data. So how can you, what are some kind of key insights that would help shortcut. I think some people feel frustrated. Well, how do I reach policymakers? Do I just, if I have an idea, what do I do? I hear that a lot. How can people come to your office
Yeah,
with
I
ideas?
think, Kavita, people think that it's very complicated.
It's not.
But it's not. It's not.
Keep it simple, stupid is something
exactly.
we would talk about in the office a lot because
Well, I mean,
it's
I think for those of you that are in business, you don't have a problem picking up the phone and talking to someone that is maybe a distant a colleague in the same business that you're in, and it's the same for me. And I think it's a little sad that people think that they can't, approach me, but they can, and I think that across the country that, for the most part, I think U.S. senators are tougher to get a hold of because they represent an entire state. They represent an entire state. But for members of the House, I think that that you call.
and it helps.
That you
though
call.
I think
And I know that this is sounding oversimplified, but
simple.
I'm sharing with you that that's what Josh did. He contacted my office, and he had some other pals that wanted to meet with me, and we did. And they told me everything that was going wrong. They had a long, a list as long as the El Camino. And
they know what that is. See,
they know the
They
El
know what that
Camino.
is.
They don't know
Laguna Honda.
Laguna
They know
Honda,
the El Camino.
but they do now. But and it was important for them to tell me what was not working and how it was depriving innovation to keep moving through the pipeline and the issues at the FDA and all of that. But they were very interesting stories that they told me. But I can't legislate on a story. You have to have data. You have to have facts. Facts matter. We all know what is troubling our democracy. We can't agree on the facts in our country, right? So I said to Josh, you know what, you have to bring me some data. And they did. And they did. And we worked together. And it worked, right? It worked. Yeah, it did. It did. So, and that's not atypical. That's a very typical story I just shared with you. Years ago, there were a group of women, small group of women, that wanted to meet with me, and I did. I met with them. They had all had breast cancer. They had all had mastectomies. They all had health insurance coverage, but the insurance companies considered reconstructive surgery cosmetic. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just about fell out of my chair when they told me that. I had no idea, and no one had ever shared that with me. So I did legislation on that. And then advocates from all over the country, breast cancer coalitions, came together around that legislation. So they were here at home. We did press conferences. And the Republicans were in control. And I said, you know what you need to do? You need to honor the chairman of my committee. You need to go and meet with him. He was from Virginia, Mr. Bliley. He was a Southern gentleman. He looked like he was right out of Central Casting, didn't he?
Yeah.
He had a bow tie and he was very proper. He was a funeral director. He owned a funeral home. And it's so interesting, the backgrounds. I mean, there have been upholsterers in the Congress, but God bless them. I mean, they know something about their community, their people. Yes, exactly, yeah. So they did, that he was considering the legislation, and they made him king for a day, a week, a month, a year. And but we brought so many people together, and it became the law.
It worked.
The law. It worked.
It takes a lot of, it's
Well, they're heavy lifts.
take years.
But I think you have a deeper appreciation of how heavy the lift is when you think of how many people, what the majority is, what you need to reach. And it's not easy just because you have a great bill and you have 300 co-sponsors. That's the overwhelming majority of the House. House of Representatives, 435 people. And if you have a stinkpot chairman that's not in the mood, you know, and then you have to make your way. So there are many skills that I think you need to employ. And
It goes back to your son returning that Blockbuster videos,
yeah,
right? It all
yeah.
comes back to.
But you know what, too? You have to be tenacious. And, you know, everyone here is an innovator or learning how to be a better one. Isn't tenacity a part of this?
Yep.
I mean, you're so, you know, determined. You're so determined by the idea, whatever that idea is. The framers were determined. You know, if there's anyone that really hasn't done anything, that means that they never even tried, you know. And I think that if you're willing to fail, and I think failure is highly underrated. It teaches you a lot. But high risk, come on, we can get these things done. And I think if we don't hold on to that spirit and make sure that in the weeds are regulations, FDA approves something, and then what? You have to wait 5 years to see if you are ever going to be reimbursed for anything? That's not a very smart system.
And then even longer to get it into the hands of patients,
And then
et
to
cetera, et
patients.
cetera.
That's right.
Right.
So these are our challenges. Yeah.
So these are real challenges. Let's try to end on an inspirational note.
Okay.
So this is.
Well, hopefully some of this has been inspirational,
It
Kavita. Jeez.
It's all inspirational. Sorry. All right. Let me go back.
Come on.
I know. All right. I get my. Why don't if you don't mind, just in that same spirit of inspiration, try to just any reflection. I know that you've been talking to so many constituents. You're constantly trying to listen. What's been inspiring you lately?
I think what I saw in the pandemic,
Say
what
more
I saw in
about
the
that.
pandemic,
Uh-huh.
where so many people just gave 1,000% of themselves to help somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the goodness and the decency of
People
the
forget,
American
right.
people, really, you know. And, you know, the country had just been through so much, and we're still dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, you know, the grades and the learning of children, so many things. The Dobbs decision, chaos, fear, anger, that's another layer. The economy having come to a screeching halt. And people are worn down. Now we have inflation. Geez, every time I drive by a gas station, it's like a billboard to me. How much are they, you know, how much is it today? So I think that the American people don't have the fullest sense or appreciation of their resilience.
Yeah.
We are a resilient people.
Yeah.
We are. And, but what I saw taking place in the communities across my congressional district and obviously in the country, all the healthcare workers. And then to see nurses wrapping themselves in garbage bags because, you know, we didn't have everything that they needed. So, you know, that seems like it's in the distant past. It wasn't all that long ago.
No.
And I really have an unswerving faith in people.
Yeah.
I see it. I see it. I think I saw it, you know, obviously in my own family, because they fled persecution. They came, my mother and father on each, you know, each family, they came to the United States. They chose America. They chose America. I was born here. They chose America. How much they loved it, what they gave to it. They never wanted to go back to travel anywhere from where they had come from. I remember Daddy saying, I said, you're retiring, travel. He said, why would I want to go there? What about the United States? What about America? So, but, what people gave of themselves, is, will always, it'll always remain with me. It inspired me. And then people would say to me, how can you stand it? It's so hard, it's so whatever. I said, look, America is worth it. That's my answer to them. America is worth it. We have our challenges, and they're very serious ones. I would never diminish where we are right now, but
People sacrifice so much.
that's right. And, we stand on the shoulders of greats.
Yep.
That our cemeteries and Normandy is that where they're sleeping in eternity. What the average age was, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And they knew what they were going into. They were kids. They knew what they were going into. And if you've walked that cemetery, if you haven't, go to Normandy, where they are sleeping. And in some cases, it's a father with his son buried next to him. And in some cases, a father and a son on each side. So when people say to me, how can you stand it? This is so hard. What are we going to do? Whatever.
Remember that.
I said, remember that. Look what they did. We can meet the moment. And for all of these regulatory challenges, to me, that's like something out of a seed catalog, No, really, because it's doable. It's doable. That is doable. You put the right people together, you have the right recipe with the right ingredients, we can do that. And, to always, for all of us to keep in mind that whatever we're doing, we owe something to this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We owe something to this country.
The notion of public service should be part of all of us. There's no...
you know what? Our national public service is we do the service at home.
Yeah.
In our own community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
All right, well,
I think, is that a happy note?
It's very, I couldn't ask for
But it is. I mean, we're so blessed. We're
I don't know
blessed.
if we have...
Do we have time for questions?
She's standing with a mic, so do we...
Do you want to or no?
One question.
It's dark out now. I don't know what time it
You have
is.
the mic, so I'm going to make you...
Okay.
I'm going to make Josh the...
Not this one.
No.
Well, thank you. I'm interested in the GME enrollment caps. There seems to be a shortage. The graduate medical education
yes.
enrollment caps that limits the number of medical school students that are enrolled by supported universities. There's definitely a shortage. We have people with GEDs deciding whether to...
No, I know what it is. I know very well what it is.
Well, I mean, the private health insurance companies have the GED employees as clerks making decisions about whether or not to approve or deny a physician's recommendation. And I think that's a very concerning point. So if we had more doctors, do you think that might provide more opportunity?
I think it's very important that Congress fully fund graduate medical education. It's essential. And I think
It's actually what you had in the Affordable
Yes,
Care Act. That was
exactly.
in the House version,
Yeah,
and we screwed it up on
and
the
the
Senate side.
Senate took
Yes,
it out.
that was actually a very poorly, that was one of my biggest regrets.
Well, every
what
time this
came out of the House
appropriation,
version,
yeah, I know. Every time this
unfortunately.
appropriation comes up, it's always Lucille Packard Children's Hospital.
Yep.
We work so closely with them. They're just outstanding, really, to increase it, to increase the numbers. I'm not so aware of what you're talking about, the insurance companies or whatever. You can talk to me afterward about it, all right?
All right, one more. Josh is getting free with the mic here. Okay, one more. You're the last question.
Okay. Hi, Congressman Eshoo. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Nice to see you again. My name is Divya, and I'm an undergraduate here studying computer science and political science. And my question for you, hopefully is going to leave us with an inspirational note, is if you were in my or a lot of the audience's shoes, you're an undergraduate in college, what would be the skills and things you're trying to learn so that you can make the most impact for both national service and the country in general.
Look at that.
I think,
I mean,
yeah, you
she's
know what,
doing it.
you really can't, you are. I think that for each one of us, you have to follow what your passions are. You're not going to really put your heart and soul into studying for something that you really aren't,
love.
that you can't wait to do it. So I would say follow your passions, follow what you really care about, and I think that's the biggest thing.
But that can often mean taking risks like you did.
Oh, absolutely,
So sometimes,
absolutely.
following your passion or doing
Well,
what
there's
you're
no
doing.
such thing as a straight line in
Exactly,
life.
right.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's failing and talking about that failure and using your
Remember
passion.
what I said? Failure is highly underrated.
It is.
It really is. I learned so much, and it's not so much a failing grade. I mean, for me, when I failed, everybody knew. You lose the election.
It was very public.
No, I mean, I said, how much bigger can you get where, 700,000 people and more, No, it's like, poor thing, she didn't measure up. But there's a big difference between losing and being a loser.
Oh,
That
all right.
was the most inspiring and, I know, seriously
Should I have said that
inspiring
at the
Innovators
beginning?
Workbench we've ever had. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
I just
I love being with you all. Thank you.
It was
Thank you.
incredible.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I'll welcome everybody to enjoy the refreshments outside and just maybe thank the Congresswoman one more time for this
Yeah.
amazing,
Thank you.
amazing speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you.